Kamen Rider Saber is the 31st Kamen Rider series and the second Reiwa era series. Following up from the much hyped Kamen Rider 01 is no easy task, especially when you have Takeru Fuketa as the series' main writer, who wrote Kamen Rider Ghost, which is a series that a lot of the Western Kamen Rider fans hate. I wouldn't entirely blame Takeru for Ghost's failings though, as there was apparently quite a bit of behind the scenes meddling along with having to share financial resources with Kamen Rider Amazons. Also, he apparently only wrote the first 11 to 12 episodes of Ghost. Besides, he's not the only writer behind Saber, because Keiichi Hasegawa actually wrote most of the show. This guy is a legend, helping to write Ultraman's well-beloved Tiga Dyna Gaia 90s trilogy, Nexus, Ginga, along with Kamen Riders Double, Fours, and Drive, so the man has quite a great legacy of work behind him. With all that being said, let me do a spoiler analysis of Kamen Rider Saber to see if it's truly a good show. The series stars a novelist named Toma, who has been granted the power to become the next Kamen Rider Saber, and is recruited by the Sword of Logos to help them fight against the Megid, who seek to remake the world in their own image. The Sword of Logos already has quite a few Kamen Riders working for them, like Rintaro, Kamen Rider Blades, Kento, Kamen Rider Espada, Ryo, Kamen Rider Buster, Ren, Kamen Rider Kenzan, and Tetsuo, Kamen Rider Slash. Together, these good boys work together to fight off the Megid and the mysterious Kamen Rider Caliber. That's just the first 15 episodes though, as once Caliber is defeated, a revelation comes up that forces Toma to split up from the Swords of Logos and attempt to win back his friends with his ideals and skill with the help of Yuri, the Sword of Light, aka Kamen Rider Psycho. After a good 15 or so episodes of infighting, everyone comes together to defeat the true enemy of the show, Isaac, aka Kamen Rider Suleiman. Oh wait, never mind, the incarnation of creative depression is our final villain. As for the players in this story, Toma is a nice guy protagonist, and I think he plays that role well, especially when he's interacting with other writers, both in comedic and dramatic moments. I feel like that's what makes Toma interesting, is him being an inspiration or foil to other Kamen Riders, which helps them on their arcs. Toma is also a writer who suffers from consistent writer's block and gets his good ideas from his friends, so I might relate to him a bit. Rintaro didn't have a standard childhood, as he was taken in by the Sword of Logos and grew up training with them, which explains his more awkward social interactions, like calling people Homo sapiens. He slowly starts to open up more thanks to Toma and Mei's support. He really gets a chance to shine when Toma leaves the Sword of Logos, where he starts to question his allegiances to this organization he devoted his entire life to. He's definitely one of the best characters in the show of how strong and natural his character arc is. Mei is a really fun character, serving as a sidekick hype lady to the main cast. While she's not a Kamen Rider, she still gets to be a valuable character with her comedic moments that don't take away from the main action's own plot. Even without her comedy, she's still very important to help ground the main cast and help Rintaro with his character growth. Kento is a lot. He's Toma's childhood best friend, which leads to some fun interactions between the two, but he's also tormented by Caliber, as he's Kento's dad. Which turns out to be false, because Caliber is actually Daichi, the original Kamen Rider Saber, who passed on the mantle of Saber to Toma many years ago. Assuming Daichi betrayed his dad, Kento attempts to defeat him, but he dies in battle. The great thing about Kento in the first arc is that he has some connection to all of the writers, so his death serves as a great motivating force for those characters. A few episodes later, Kento comes back to life and becomes the new Kamen Rider Caliber, where he tries to steal all of the sacred swords because he's seen a ton of futures and is now convinced that unless he does this, the world will end. However, Toma defies fate and starts changing the future Kento saw, which makes him reconsider the whole Dark Path quest and eventually reunites with Toma and the other writers. I've seen Kento get bashed on during his time as Caliber, but I actually quite liked it. The dude is clearly under some massive despair after seeing his friends and the world die off in so many alternate futures that I can't blame him for his lonely tendencies. I do like Kento overall, but I did wish when he came back that he interacted with the other cast members besides Toma and Ren, especially since he had a great rapport with everyone before he died. As for Daichi, the big villain of the first arc, he's probably one of the highlights of this series. You see, Kento's dad was Caliber and Daichi defeated him as Saber several years ago, but Daichi learns that there was a traitor within the Sword of Logos, so he took on the Caliber moniker and teamed up with the Megid to find the truth about who betrayed the writers. In this quest for truth, he gets carried away by darkness and naturally does some evil things that Toma has to stop. Not only is Daichi a really cool villain with fascinating motivations, but he teases a future plot point with the Sword of Logos, which factors into the next arc of Saber. I also like how, with Caliber being the original Saber, it gives Toma a passing the torch moment to prove that he's worthy of being a Kamen Rider. Ryo has a very wholesome dad dynamic of his son Sora, and Tetsuo is the Sword of Logos weapon expert, who is the best character in Saber. These two are often teamed up together for being some of the older writers in the series, and while there's not much to say fandom as the other characters, I still enjoy their presence a ton, so I wouldn't consider them wasted characters. As for Ren, he starts off as an amusing pipsqueak who thinks that strength equals justice, looking up to Kento for that strength and later envying Toma for his strength. Ren leaves the Sword of Logos and teams up with the rogue wildcard monster known as Dizas to find strength, but he still tries to find out what makes Toma, Kento, and the other riders so strong and constantly spends time wondering how they did it, which stunted his growth. When Ren has his last fight with Dizas, it clicks with him that instead of trying to mimic the other riders like he was doing earlier in the fight, that he should just embrace his own strength, which leads to him winning. All Ren needed to do was embrace his own strength and go for his goals instead of finding out how others got successful, which I find a really good moral to teach people. Ren's arc might be a slow burn, I'll admit, but I found it an entertaining slow burn that paid off for how well it concluded. Yuri, the Sword of Light, is a really charming character. I mean, he's a literal sword, how cool is that? Yuri used to wield the Sword of Light, but he decided to become the sword after seeing his mortal friends be corrupted by such power. Through his fish out of water comedic bits and hanging out with Toma, he gains a new appreciation for humanity, which leads to him getting a power-up form that regains his human body. Yuri's actually one of my favorite characters in the show for how adorkable he is. Unfortunately, we get to Rekka, which is probably where Saber makes its biggest misstep. She starts off really good, being a manipulative and cold villain, especially when she becomes Kamen Rider Sabella. However, then her brother Ryoga, aka Kamen Rider Durandal, appears. After Durandal's debut, more than half of her dialogue from this point in the show is, "Brother, brother, you're so cool, brother," and it's pretty uncomfortable and a far cry from her initial characterization. As for Ryoga himself, he is a cool looking obstacle, but he really doesn't get any moment to shine as a character. At least not in Saber. To promote superhero Senki, Kamen Rider Saber and Kikai Sentai Zenkaiger had crossover episodes, and the Zenkaiger crossover episode gave Ryoga actual characterization and pathos instead of just being a style over substance character. Kinda oof that we had to get this characterization from another show, but hey, it's better than nothing. Ligale and Seuss could have had more moments to be fleshed out outside of their final battles, but I think they served their purpose as mid-series boss as well. Isaac is the head of the Sword of Logos, and decided to turn the organization from something good to something evil because he's been alive for thousands of years and he's really bored. Through this conquest, he becomes Kamen Rider Suleiman and becomes a really fun bastard character to watch on screen. However, his time as the main villain lasts a tad too long for my liking, since while Isaac is entertaining, he becomes one note very quickly. Though he is still really cool for fighting the Kamen Riders just as a regular old dude before becoming Suleiman. As for the actual final villain of Saber, Storius is a character we see scheming with Ligale and Zeus at the beginning of the show, along with helping Isaac later on. Once all of those dudes are defeated, Storius starts his plan to end the world by becoming Kamen Rider Storius. His motivation for doing this is that he was a writer a long time ago, but once he found the omnipresent tomb, he found that everything humanity has done has been written on it and becomes convinced that original creativity doesn't exist, so what's the point of making stories? And dang, did that hit close to home! This also makes him a great parallel to Toma, who is a fellow novelist and believes that no matter how many times the story's been done, they can still connect and inspire others. I think that's a really powerful message, especially since Saber is the series that aired for most of Kamen Rider's 50th anniversary. It feels meta how the 50th anniversary series comments on the reuse of ideas and tropes and how they can still make it fresh. However, while Saber does have an engaging plot and great character dynamics, it seems to be more focused on action scenes than any other Kamen Rider show I've seen. That's not a bad thing, as Kamen Rider is an action show and these fights are beautiful and help drive home the big emotional scenes. Eventually, because the first two episodes used really weird CGI that makes my eyes hurt, but they quickly used the CGI to enhance practical fights instead of being the whole show. One of my favorite examples of this is in episode 6, where they use a CGI background but still have the suit actors doing what they do best. The fight choreography makes for some of the best action I've seen in Kamen Rider, which helps with the amazing suit designs. Kamen Rider Saber is a flawed series with a lot of wasted potential with some of its characters and some wonky creative choices, but the good stuff is so good that it's become a new personal favorite of mine. It's a beautifully directed show with charming characters and important message about the nature of creativity and storytelling. Even if it seems that every story has been done before, the impact and inspiration that other stories along with our life experience gives us can create something brand new. That was the important statement that Saber taught me. Thanks, Saber. You truly were an almighty series.